Welcome to our webinar from Simon Associates Management Consultants. The title of our webinar today is Finding Your Blue Ocean Strategy. It's designed around the residential real estate industry, and it comes out of some work that I did for residential real estate brokers and others who are interested in a similar category and how to apply Blue Ocean strategy to their industry. I'm Andy Simon. I'm President and CEO of Simon Associates Management Consultants. I'm a corporate anthropologist. I work with companies that need or want to change. Simon Associates was designed to bring experts together around Blue Ocean strategy, strategic innovation and innovation games, culture change, branding, rebranding, and inbound marketing. In this webinar, my job is to help you do four things. First, I want to help you see, feel, and think about your business in new ways. And second, I want you to understand the difference between a red ocean and a blue ocean strategy and why today is a great time for you to begin to think about blue ocean strategy in innovative ways. I'd like you to try a blue ocean strategic process. And if you don't want to do it right now, you can come back and try some of the methods afterwards and leave with some tools to use for your own organizations. Often the best ideas are right around you. So let me begin. The way forward is paradoxically not to look ahead, but to look around. John Seely Brown, at the time he said that, was director of Xerox Research at Palo Alto. And John Brown has become quite a guru in the area of innovation. But I love this picture because I remember that computer that I had and people all around us looking at the screen just like that. But the most important part is that the ideas for your strategy, particularly a blue ocean one, is that the opportunities, possibilities are all around you. The question is, how do you see them? Because that has morphed to this. And whether it's selfies or it's cell phones, and that has morphed to this, with everybody texting and looking at the phone. The phone has become a minor part of these pieces of equipment as everything has been transformed. And the role of all of these in real estate is really extremely important as you begin to think about how you could add value in innovative ways for your agents and your customers and those who could be your customers. I always like to remind people about John Kenneth Galbraith's quote because it's so typical of what we find when we're working with companies. Faced with the choice between changing one's mind and proving that there's no need to do so, almost everyone gets busy on the proof. This is extremely common, very important, because at the end of the day, you really have to see things with new eyes. This was given to me by somebody I was working with, and he said to me, "This is really what it's about, isn't it? The real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes." And this is all about seeing with fresh eyes. The problem is, Anais Nin is a diarist, but this goes back to Socrates, the observation that we don't see things as they are, we see things as we are, and our brain is very good at projecting a perceptual reality that doesn't necessarily match what is actually happening. Part of the problem is that the brain hates to change. The change creates pain in the brain. It's extremely efficient. It uses about 25% of your body's energy, and it doesn't particularly like to learn new things. After the age of 30 or so, you have a pretty well settled brain that sorts reality to conform to what it thinks is real. But the times continue to change. A little Darwin, it isn't the strongest and the smartest that thrive, it's the most adaptive. And in times of rapid change, like we are facing now and have been for the last 50 years, you can stay as you've always done. You can try and be stable like you always were, or you can begin to leapfrog over what's happening and lead. This is a chart that came out of a Harvard Business Review article from March 2013. Great article. The gray is pretty much a picture about the way things used to be. I always think of the Kodak Brownie camera that came out in 1900 and lasted till 1970. Things were early innovators and early adopters. There was the early majority, then the late majority, and the laggards. And this was a pretty typical picture of how business evolved. We always used to talk about the early adopters and who was really capitalizing on them. Today, the big bang market segments are trial users, the vast majority, And then something new comes along. They emerge, they surge, and then they purge. And the changes are coming much faster. This is a very dangerous place for people. We don't like uncertainty and we don't really trust it. We are very habit driven and we're happy when we can do what we've always done, that we have learned to do, but times are changing. So it's a great time for us to begin to embrace the fuzzies. Think about stepping into the unknown as something that's really joyful as opposed to something that is really scary. And it's a great image about that foot going into the unknown with a smile on his face, and I hope there's one on yours. Somehow you're going to have to forget the pain of ambiguity. I love Robert von Och's quote, take advantage of the ambiguity in the world, look at something and think what else it might be. When you're looking at blue ocean strategy, that's exactly what we're going to be doing. The most important part is you must have the right strategy. And strategy is not a marketing strategy, it's a business strategy. So let me talk to you a little bit more about red ocean and blue ocean strategies. Could a blue ocean strategy help you? This quote comes from Renee Mauban and W. Chan Kim, who wrote Blue Ocean Strategy, but it comes from an article of theirs back in 1997, well early in their development of this concept. The quote is, what separates high growth companies from the pack is the way managers make sense of how they do business. Make sense of how they do business. So Renee and Chan Kim are over at INSEAD in France. They were in 2011 ranked number 2, and they are the winners in 2011 of the Thinkers 50 Strategy Award. They have marvelous programs over there in Blue Ocean. Their new book is 10 years old, but they have a new reprint of it with new information. And it's quite a fascinating community of us who are all involved in helping companies find their blue ocean strategies. The key blue ocean question is, why do some companies achieve sustained high growth in both revenues and profits? It's just not a margin strategy, it's a revenue and a profit. High growth companies, when they're compared to the less successful competitors, what can it show us? And what they found was that the answer lay in the way each group approached strategy, which is a really interesting process that they found. They were looking at 150 different companies, trying to figure out which ones thrived and which ones stayed still or even shrunk. The less successful, think red ocean, took a very conventional approach. And forgive my robots that are fighting each other, but they basically had a strategy to stay ahead of the competition. So they were one step ahead or two, but they were competing against others like them and doing so thinking that's how we thrive. Remember that in traditional strategic thinking, you defined your market and you begin to compete against others in it. But high growth companies think blue ocean. And this is a robot that Google is working on that is designed to transform lots of things. But in stark contrast here, high growth companies pay little attention to matching or beating their rivals. They pay little attention to competing. Instead, they sought to make their competitors irrelevant. We're going to talk about that a lot. How do we make competitors irrelevant? Through a strategic logic of value innovation, not just value creation, but value innovation. Most importantly, when you're value innovating, you're going to assess your opportunities without being biased or constrained by where you are at a given time. Value innovators have more insight into where value for their buyers resides and how it's changing. So think this through. At a given moment in time, you become sacred and very protective of what you're doing now. But value innovators, blue ocean thinkers, take a look at how the value is changing, and they act on that. So I'll start with some of the things that you might see that Renee Mauban and Chan Kim saw and that we think about in blue ocean strategy. First of all, it doesn't matter what kind of industry or type of company you're in. It was quite irrelevant. Those that really thrived created uncontested market space. They moved into areas that others were not occupying. And we'll talk a lot about this in terms of the real estate industry itself. These were market creators, not market competitors. They looked at how to create a market in which there were no direct competitors at the moment, maybe alternative solutions, but not similar ones. And by so doing, reconstructed market boundaries. And some of you are going to say, what is she talking about? Bear with us as we start to explain this. Particularly important is you focus on the big picture, not the numbers. You can get into the business plan afterwards, but this is visioning at its best. You got to think about reaching beyond existing demand. So, in your market for real estate, it isn't about simply how many agents you have or how many customers are coming through. It's changing the way you approach them and their needs. You go looking for non users with unmet needs, particularly for you, unmet needs. And we'll play around with some things because I keep wondering how come the people who sell you the home don't also help you move in and get organized and bring in friends and family and do all sorts of other things that my realtor did when we moved into our house quite a number of years ago. Most important, those who move into blue oceans have a focus on how to solve problems differently. They're value innovators, not just value creators. Why is this so important today, and particularly for you in the real estate industry? There continues to be a rising call for creative new solutions. I don't care whether it's Zillow or Truly, things are changing and changing fast, and agents are changing, and young people, Gen Ys, are different than boomers. So there's lots of stuff. There's locational shifts and generational shifts in both demand and growth, and we'll talk about them briefly. There's a rising speed and ease of new technologies disrupting traditional behaviors. And this is more than just the technology itself, but it's how it's changing disruptive behaviors. And then there's a challenge of standing apart in overcrowded markets. Being another is no longer sufficient. Being the best of the rest is helpful, and being the only is really important. So let's talk about the trends and challenges in the real estate markets. As I did my research for this webinar, I was fascinated by what the PricewaterhouseCoopers PwC had for emerging trends in real estate for 2016. Now, this is the 37th year that they've produced this research, and it was very interesting. A couple of hot quotes that really captured the essence of what they were seeing. This was a lending officer at a large financial services institution looking at 16 and 17. You can never forget about cycles, right? But the next 24 months look doggone good for real estate. And that's sort of really cool, but not necessarily sufficient. A big push in their research, disciplined attention to strategy and execution is critical to success. But which strategy? A red ocean strategy or a blue ocean strategy? The opportunities facing you and lots of others were extremely important, and I'll go through them very quickly and refer you back to the research if you'd like. The first is 18-hour cities. In 2014, they were beginning to see an emerging trend at cities that are not 9 to 5 nor 24 hours, but they offer a lot of evening activities, restaurants, and other types of things to keep people downtown. At the same time, they're close enough to suburbs for people to come in and out. And they're beginning to see an important trend as that's developing, making it possible for them to offer benefits of a large urban area at significantly lower cost. And the number of markets that are cool in this area are important, whether it's Dallas or Denver, Austin, San Diego, Charlotte, Charleston. These are hot areas that are offering different lifestyles around 18-hour cities. Anywhere in the market is good is likely a thing of the past because this is really a very important return to something where people are living and working in the cities, not necessarily the New Yorks or the San Franciscos. Now, next stop, the suburbs. What is a suburb? The second trend they found is this question about, are the suburbs dead or are they really still vibrant? So the suburbs remain in this research a state of transition because the dynamic 10 towns, there are only about 10 dynamic downtowns in the country. The rest are areas where people are in the suburbs. But the results show that millennials prefer to live in the city than currently do, and conversely, a large number of millennials prefer to live in the suburbs than currently do. So there's going to be a shift over time, but who knows exactly when? But the gap between the locations is expected to be smaller. One of the things that I thought was a very important number is that this is all about transportation in a world where two-income households are the social norm. And so those become extremely important trends here. At the end of the day, the number of people living in suburbs may shift from 70% to 65%, but it's really going to be an important part of the housing and the lifestyles. And the suburbs themselves are changing how they offer the kinds of accommodations and services that urban areas might have before. Now, the third one I love, because I watch this in lots of places, but offices are real big barometers of change. And what's happening is that the office space is changing, with walls and cubicles are being rethought, and they open up space in different ways. And this is far more than just reducing the amount of space by employee. This is a whole change in the workspace. And the second part is entrepreneurial businesses really enjoy this and find it a great way to participate. Co-working space firms have been actively moving into this element of office workers, whether it's computer coders or business consultant or lawyers or knowledge workers. They're taking part of the space part of the time, and they become mainstays for these tenants' companies. There's always a risk to it, but right now it's a growing area, and they're figuring out issues like how can we get co-working spaces not generating the same kind of regulatory pushback that'll limit the way they operate. The next one is a housing option for everyone. We talked about suburbs and about 18-hour cities. Well, this is a lot of different housing options that are emerging. This is both the global crisis after the recession, but people change. And there's lots of different ways that people are living in co-housing solutions, micro-housing, design trends, where the scarcity and lifestyle issues are shaping household preferences. One company, for example, is targeting an age segment as young as the late 40s who may want community amenities like catered meals, happy hours, and shared recreation, and may become the market for a more senior-oriented facility in later decades of life. There's greater diversity in demand and supply of different sectors, and there's a migration of housing styles from one target market to another. And the expansion of the student housing mode should not be underestimated, where people are renting your bedroom and bath in a group setting because they both enjoy it and they can't afford otherwise. Parking is very interesting. We used to build and have a certain number of parking spaces per unit, but they're finding that people are using mass transit where they can. They're walking a great deal more, and whether it's for shopping or for living, they are changing the way they use the car. Zip cars, Uber are changing the need for the car, which changes the need for parking and how to use that space more effectively. Food. I want to talk about food in the cities. It's not going to take over the agribusiness, but there's lots of foodies in the city that are really changing the production. And in some of the cities, they have 100 million investments in producing pounds of food. And that's not just in Newark or Camden or Detroit, but in Brooklyn. And you find in San Francisco, where large production of vegetables are really making an impact and making it easier for restaurants to get bought just in time fresh food. We have consolidation breeds specialization, and large lenders are cautious, and smaller ones need different relationships, and they are often moving into larger lending structures. And the trend looks like it's a granularity at the texture of the industry, or maybe the sharpness of your picture may depend on the density of its pixels. This success will be a matter of high-resolution operations in 2016 and beyond. Return of the human touch. With all the focus on technology, there's a lot more focus on the human touch. And that's getting more human touch into the offices, into the people we work together with, and into those who we serve. Now, I'll add one more set of ahas. The real estate in the digital age is a terrific piece that was put up by the Real Estate Association. Here's what's important. 58% of the millennials used an iPhone when they were shopping for a house. It's very different for boomers, certainly for the silent generation. Only 5% of millennials searched with a Windows-based mobile device. That's a very different iPhone and an iPad. What are you doing with your apps and how is it going to affect it? 27% found a home with a mobile app. So this is important. YouTube is the top video research destination for home shoppers. Extremely important to be visible. YouTube is Google, and Google and YouTube love each other. This is where the pain points are. Finding the right property was ranked most difficult for most everybody. So that's sort of what comes with it. But the middle section is that the paperwork, understanding the process, was more difficult for millennials than any other generation. What could that offer you as an open market space with an unfilled need that people could really use you for? And maybe you're looking at me and saying, what is she talking about? We look for pain points in the buyer's journey that could be opportunities that you can convert into real value in innovative ways. Only 24% of the boomers noted there were no difficult steps compared to 9% of the millennials. That means that millennials are having bad times finding the house and going through the process. So, in business, adaptation is the key to survival and competitive advantage. This came out of the PwC. I thought it was very appropriate. The result is whether one decides to play offense or defense. This real estate cycle is giving everyone a wide array of choices in a big, broad number of markets. This is strategy. It comes down to calling the proper play and executing it to perfection. So the times they are changing, as Bob Dylan said. What do you need to thrive? A strategy. My Sun Sun quote, all men can see these tactics whereby I conquer, but what none can see is a strategy out of which victory is evolved. And hope is not a strategy. So, if we need a strategy to thrive, what is it? A well-defined, integrated, cohesive approach. A clear, simple story. Your hook. All strategies ask, what customers or markets do we serve? What distinguishes us? What's our value proposition? What key processes give us competitive advantage? What are the human, technological, or organizational enablers of the strategy? In a red ocean that we often play with, competing against others, we take our market structure as given. And we carve out a position against the competition in that existing market space. So as you think about it, you're all looking at this, and you may be looking at it as competitors of each other, trying to find potential home buyers in very similar ways. You win, they lose. How do you grab a bigger share of the market? It's a zero-sum game. And as one wins and the other loses, you scratch your head and wonder why. In a blue ocean strategy, you reconstruct the market. You create demand in a market space that does not exist today, and you value innovate. Blue ocean strategy is a way to make the competition irrelevant by creating a leap in value for both the company and your customers. Should you? Well, I was a banker for 15 years. I like the numbers. This is very compelling. Renee Mabon and Chan Kim, in developing the Blue Ocean strategy, studied business launches in 150 companies. 86% were line extensions. Nothing wrong with that. They had 62% of the revenues and 39% of the total profits, but it was a red ocean of bloody competition. Those that went after new demand, creating it in a new market space with adding innovation in a value-based way that's different, they had 40% of the revenues, but a startling 61% of the total profits. The margins were much stronger in the blue ocean. Are you going to open up a new market space or compete in the one you have now? The difference is very clear. In a red ocean strategy, you compete in your existing market space. You're going to beat the competition. You're going to exploit existing demand and make the value cost trade-off. By that, we mean when you add value, you add cost. And you're going to focus on either being differentiated or low cost. You somehow can't figure out how to be both. In a blue ocean strategy, you create uncontested market space. You make the competition irrelevant, and that's not a bad thing to think about. Create and capture new demand. It's out there waiting for you. It's all of that possibilities around you. You just have to create and capture it. You're going to break the value cost trade-off. As you add value, you're going to shift your investments to reduce the cost. And then you're going to be both differentiated and low cost because you're not going to have unnecessary parts to this. Where should you be looking? It's extremely important that you're going to change the market space you're competing in. You can't look inside it. So when you're playing in a red ocean, you look at the same industry, the same strategic group, your premium or your budget, the same buyer group. You go through your distributors or you look at your end users or you go direct to consumer. You think of your scope of your product or your service offering to have a listing and to sell a house. Your functional and emotional orientation of the industry. And the last one on the bottom, I'm sorry, cut off there, is time and trends. What's happening in the trends that are really important? In a blue ocean strategy, you look across. You look across the industry, the group, and we'll talk more about where the opportunities are. Often ideas are going to come from places you hadn't expected, particularly those trends. So as you're thinking about this, think carefully about whether you want to go left or right. Do you want to sit in a blue ocean where no one else is, where you're the only, or you want to compete against others very much like you? You might be the best of the rest, but you might just be another. Now, not everybody I work with wants to be in the blue ocean. They start there, but they sometimes are incrementalist and it's hard to see things in new ways. So they stay in the red ocean and they swim and they have their share. It's okay. But if you want to go right, you have to think about things differently. Now, here, I want you to see what Andre Rieu did in changing classical music. And I use him as an illustration. And if you have a moment, look at him on YouTube because it's very interesting to see what he's done. And I can't show you that video easily here, but we'll talk about it. I'm a fan of classical music, and I was on the board of the Hudson Valley Philharmonic for many years. Classical concerts is a struggling industry. I'm taking you into classical music because it's so far from your real estate that it will show you things that might be applicable. It will also show you why looking outside of your industry is so helpful. Only 20% of Americans in the U.S. go to concerts. That's down 3% and shrinking. It's an aging consumer. We used to think of them as gray hairs and no hairs. 97% of the first-time goers never return. In 2009, I believe it was, the symphonies, philharmonics in the U.S. came together to do research. And when they found this, they became really concerned about how they were going to sustain their growth. As the generations changed, they just weren't any fun. This is a picture of a typical classical concert. I use this because it illustrates so beautifully the seats in the front with gray hairs and no hairs, and the seriousness of it. Andre Rieu wanted to bring classical music to people in a different way. And if you've seen him, you probably know what I'm talking about already. He was an excellent violinist, but when he was playing his violin in a classical concert, this is what he saw. Not exactly this, but very much like this. He watched his audience sleep. And then he went to rock concerts, whole different package. And everybody's standing and they're singing. And they have big screens so that you can see the stage. Nobody's sleeping. So I give you a code here that you can look up a classical concert and see what it looks like. I'm not going to play this for you, but I wish you could take a look at what a classical concert looks like. And then take a look at what Andre Rieu can do and how that might be well worth the opportunity for you to see it. This is how he became a maestro for the masses. And it's so much better if I can show you the actual video, but take a look at the audience and take a look at him. This happened to be in Chicago in the Coliseum, but it's a very different and vibrant crowd. This is another of his concerts. He went after non-users. He focused on women. He changed the whole experience. He brought in singers, and he had his orchestra dressed in colors, and they're very engaged with the audience itself. And then he went to big boxes. And in the big boxes, he borrowed from the rock concerts to provide his audience with a venue where he could provide great music in very different ways, often with local performers. In Vienna, he always does bring in the Viennese Children's Choir. In London, he brings in bagpipers. And he always starts out his concerts by saying, "My favorite audience is here in Vienna." What does he do? He reverses everything. He takes classical music and popular music, takes pieces of both, and he changes the whole package. He has a traditional setting and he reverses it with an untraditional one. People ask, "How do you perform outside if it rains?" And he gives them all plastic to put over them. And they all come. They want to dance, and he's throwing a party for them. In traditional music, you have classic form. In his, you have colors and fashion, and the brain really remembers colors better. He has his personality. He's always face first. You never see his backside. Traditional conductors face the orchestra, not the audience. Andre Rieu is totally engaged. He comes through the audience to get to the stage. Traditional conductors aren't engaged at all. Traditional music is focused on adults. In Andre Rieu, he's focused on young and old. He's throwing a party, and people can dance. There's conga lines that form. They can eat. They can celebrate with wine, and they have a whole different experience. Classical music in classical concert halls is very funereal, if not a funeral. His results are quite outstanding. Billboard ranked his 2011 tour as the ninth highest classic tour grossing of the year, just behind Lady Gaga. He broke all classical concert records. He packed stadiums and arenas with more than 700,000 fans who adore him. He sold 32 million albums with 330 platinum awards. He made $96 million. 2012, he still ranked 10th, and he had 99 shows, and he made $50 million. 2013, he made $50 million with 70 shows and 500,000 fans. And his gross in 2014 was $52 million. This is what he did, and this is why he's so useful for us. First, he created a strategic canvas of classical orchestras. His price point is the only part of a canvas that's pretty absolute. Are you high price, low price, mid price? Where do you fit? And that's the level of investment, of cost. That's the only one that's an absolute. Then on the bottom are all the things that we invest in. Well-known musicians, a stuffy, prestigious venue, formal dress, a full-length classical piece, and cerebral. And classical concerts, whether they were major orchestras, New York Philharmonics, or regional orchestras, the Hudson Valley Philharmonic, are all pretty heavily invested in those. When it comes to mass appeal, audience participation, and fun, not at all. These are really substitutes. They're all going after classical music lovers with the same attributes. They're just different in their investment, but they are not invested in mass appeal at all or fun. Andre Rieu watched his audience sleep, and he also saw people moving. And then he and his brother formed the Johann Strauss Orchestra, and he got people to come in and waltz. And next thing he knew, he was swamped with people who wanted to come into his Johann Strauss Orchestra playing waltzes, and he got them up waltzing. Then he created a DVD, and it went viral. Next thing you know, he had a platinum award, and he was a waltz king. The second blue ocean tool that's very helpful is what he did in order to refocus. It's called the 4-action framework. We call it the ERRC. What did he eliminate? Which factors that the industry takes for granted should be eliminated? Think about your own. You're shifting your focus. Which ones are going to be reduced well below the industry standards? What are you going to create that the industry has never offered? And what are you going to raise well above the industry standards? So what he shifted was he eliminated classical music, the stodgy performance hall, the disengaged conductor for the serious music lover. He eliminated and reduced the formality, the lack of community, and the quiet in the music hall. He raised the audience engagement, the conductor's engagement, the community of fans, and the use of social media. And he made it fun. He created a total party atmosphere, completely new, total engagement, face first. You never see his butt the whole time. A very local focus in a big box arena. A non-classical classical concert, a model one. So his to-be strategic canvas, you can see what he did to differentiate himself. The classical concerts are all heavily invested in well-known musicians, stuffy, prestigious venues, formal dress, full-length classical pieces, and are very cerebral. He and rock concerts, they may even be more highly priced, but let's assume they're similar in price. And they are not invested in that at all. His dress is formal, it's just very different and very colorful. But where they really invest heavily is in mass appeal, audience participation, fun, and making the stuffy accessible. Blue ocean strategies change the scope of your operations. They seek to enlarge a company's scope into markets so different from your current markets, they must be addressed as entirely new entities. And often the future of the company is outside its current competencies today. It has to be repackaged, repurposed, and reimagined. A couple of others. The strategy canvas for Southwest is a very important one. Instead of competing with other airlines, Southwest said people who drive would love us. It's much easier to take a plane from Reno to Oakland than it is to go from Reno to Los Angeles to San Francisco on American. So I took Southwest from Reno to Oakland. It was 45 minutes and $49, and I carried my bag on. Simple and easy. The others are competing for a different audience. Southwest had, 39 consecutive quarters of profits, going after those who could drive 4 hours to get from Reno to San Francisco. Yellowtail is one of my favorites. They could compete against premium wines or budget wines, but they didn't do so well in the late 1990s when they came in. So they went back and they went traveling across the U.S. to see how people drank things. And they realized that people bought a lot of beer who weren't wine drinkers. So he went after them. And when they went after them, they changed the whole strategic canvas. They raised their price to budget, a little higher than budget. $6.99, $7 a bottle was absolutely the price of a premium beer, not a premium wine. And all the things that premium wines and budget wines did, they eliminated. No use of terminology and distinctions. Above the line marketing gone. Aging quality, nope. Vineyard prestige, nope. Wine complexity, wine range. Instead, they put their wine in color-coded bottles. And they made it simple and easy for you to pick out bottles of wine. They also put them in the same shape bottle, so you didn't have to care if it was a white or a red, which was more efficient for them as well. And they also put the boxes so it was easier for the stores to put them one on top of another. So they made it easy to drink, easy to choose, fun and adventure. They sold 1 billion bottles of wine. Now, Two Buck Chuck and others have tried to compete with them. The amount of wine that's drunk in the U.S. is not in a rising area, and they're all looking for new ones today. But since 2001, they've done extremely well selling a $7 bottle of Yellowtail. These are interesting and important ones. Uber, everyone's private driver, is absolutely turning the whole taxi industry upside down. They've created a verb. Everyone wants to Uber. They're beginning to deliver packages. Uber has opened up a whole new market space, blue ocean style. Zipcar, wheels when you want them. So I live outside of New York, and on the weekends, zip cars are everywhere. It's a simpler and easier way to rent a car for a short period of time. Change the Hertz and the Enterprise and the Avis models on their heads. And then in the housing real estate industry, there's Zillow. And Zillow, with Trulia Now and Zestimate, have changed the way people shop for a house. And then they tag you when they're ready to have the right house for you. And they're very different in their interactions with you. The things that people said about them I found interesting. They go there for information. Remember that piece at the beginning where people don't know what to do and millennials feel much less experienced in this? Maybe there's something here to pay attention to. So what do we have? Andre Rieu has crossover classical music for all ages. They could have gone to a restaurant. They could have gone to a movie. They sure didn't have to come to his party. Southwest went after people who could drive, or they could take trains or buses. Yellowtail went after non-wine drinkers. They had beer and hard liquor, and they went after young women. Lots of other things to drink. Uber, you could walk. There are other ways of getting there. You can have a taxi, hire drivers, cars, challenges of getting one. And they really tackled it to make it easy and simple. Zip cars, don't rent a car for a short time. Those are lots of people. Car rental companies, buy a car, take the train. So it's not that there aren't solutions. Is yours going to be the one? And in the real estate world, what is Zillow and others doing to you online? Well, they have alternatives. They have websites for realtors. And there's search and there's YouTube and lots of options. Is this where the house finds you, or are you looking for the house? Now, I've given you enough to think about. Blue oceans are about not competing, making the competition irrelevant, opening a new market space, and beginning to see ways to add value in innovative ways. It's really about creating demand. Zillow didn't just simply burst forth. They've really worked as slowly but surely. And there's lots of discussion about what stock price should be and whether they've really created the profit. It's a little like Amazon. There's a lot of use of Zillow. Can they really make money at it? And how are they doing it? But the consumer is going to drive the future. So as you think about your own business in the real estate market, first thing you should do is draw your strategic canvas. I put down their price. Are you a high price, low price, same price? Is everyone the same price? So how do you add value? Clearly not by commoditizing yourself. And then what are you investing in on the bottom? And how could that help you begin to invest differently? So put in the dots for you and for your competition. Look at this one if you need a comparison. Are you the same experts in the agents? Are they all the same? Do you have a very prestigious venue? Where are you located? Are you all over the place or are you all in mobile? Is there a van you go around in? Are you online easily? Formal dress? Is there formality to this? Casual? Full length classical? Is it really serious and cerebral? Buying this house? How are you dealing with the human part of what this is all about? Then take a look at unmet needs. This is a great chart. Think about how you could add value in innovative ways along the whole buyer's experience. How you make it more productive for them, simple, convenient, risk, and image, environmentally friendly. Think about all the things you can do. Then, what can you do to shift your focus? What would you eliminate, reduce, create, and raise to open a whole new value curve? How would you shift it into new directions? What's the process? First, you need a visual awakening, extremely important. Now you need a second visual exploration. You need to go out into the market and see what's actually there. Who could be your non-user? Who sometimes buy your offering out of necessity? Who refuse to use you? And who never thought of your offerings as options? Might be difficult to think about, but don't ask people. They don't know. Henry Ford's quote was great. If I had asked people how I could improve their transportation, they would have told me to make their horses go faster. Where should you be looking? Not inside the same industry or strategic group, but across them. Try to make it easy for people to use you, more productive for them, more fun and adventure, something simpler and environmentally friendly. The 4-action framework will then help you, and you can then draw your visual strategy fair, your to-be canvas, visualize some ideas about new solutions, get feedback on alternative canvases from your customers, your competitors, and others who could use you, and use your feedback to build what you think is your best-to-be future. Then visually communicate it, build a story to tell to your outside team, to the outside world. Support only those projects that really support you, and test like crazy. So this is the process. My final thoughts. Blue ocean strategies push into new market space. They see things in ways not there before. You focus on unmet needs and search for non-users, and you create demand, not just fill it. If you believe there's a blue ocean, you will see it. And if you see it, you will get real excited because it can open up an entirely new opportunity just waiting for you all around you. Thanks so much. I'm Andy Simon. I'm a corporate anthropologist at Simon Associates Management Consultants. It'd be a pleasure to talk to you more about how you could find your blue ocean. Thanks for joining me.